Hello everyone, Laura here from SeeClear Counselling, and I made it on time this week. I found my right page and here I am on time with this week's video. And this week I'm going to be talking all about loneliness. And I hope that as many of you as possible were able to enjoy the bank holiday in some way. And enjoy the sunshine, because actually when we talk about loneliness, if we can get out into the fresh air and get out into the sunshine, that can give us a real boost with regard to not feeling quite so lonely. Hello Martin, thanks for joining me. So today we're going to talk all about loneliness, what loneliness means, and some ways of being able to cope with loneliness. So if you haven't joined me before on some of my lives, my name's Laura and I run my own private counselling business, SeeClear Counselling, in Poole in Dorset, and I offer face-to-face sessions, telephone and video sessions. I also run this page, SeeClear Counselling, where I offer tips and hints on mental health, and I always put the replays of these videos up onto the page afterwards. And I also have a new Facebook group, which is a support group for those adults struggling with anxiety. So if you want to join our lovely friendly support group, search for Beating Anxiety through COVID-19 and beyond, and I can welcome you into that nice little friendly group. Hi Jade, nice to see you. So let's crack on and talk about loneliness, shall we? And you know, through this isolation period, then I think that loneliness is something that is probably becoming a bigger problem. You know, before this, people were feeling lonely, living alone and feeling lonely. But obviously in this isolation period, many more people are on their own in isolation. But as I say, loneliness isn't just about being alone. Loneliness can also be about being with other people, but feeling lonely around other people as well. Hi Marie, thanks for joining. Lovely to see so many of you coming on board, and it's lovely to hear you say hi, give me a wave. It's always nice to know that there's people out there. So, I'd heard statistics that before isolation, there were 9 million people in the UK who struggled with loneliness. Now, if that was the figure before we had this social isolation, then I can imagine that the figure is much greater today after these few months of going through isolation. So I think that loneliness is really something that we need to speak about, we need to talk about, and we need to understand what's going on for people. And actually, as human beings, hi Claire, nice to see you. As human beings, we are actually social animals, and it goes back, way back to kind of caveman and tribal days. And actually, as groups of people, it meant that we were much safer people. If we were in a group, it was easier to fight off the saber-toothed tigers and other dangers that might come to us. So as humans, we started to understand that connection with others was really important and was also part of our survival. It kept us alive. And so when we're alone, we're almost taken back to that kind of tribal part of our brain where it says, you know, if we're alone, we're in more danger than if we're in a group of people. Hi Bill, nice to see you. So being alone and feeling loneliness can trigger some really, can trigger our threat system and really want us to kind of be in a much safer place. So the researchers said, hi Julie, nice to see you. Researchers said that before isolation, that 25% more people felt alone at the weekend than they did during the week. And that kind of makes sense because you're not connecting sometimes with so many people. You're not at work and things. But just think if that was the case before isolation, now we're in isolation and you know, every day is merging into one and there is no kind of social interaction and things going on. So loneliness is going to be very high at the moment. You may recall the politician Jo Cox, who was unfortunately murdered a few years ago, but she started a movement to recognise loneliness. And she said, "Hi Ginny, nice to see you." And she said that loneliness was actually one of the greatest public health challenges that this country would meet. And we do have a minister for loneliness. So there is a real importance on making sure that we're tackling this loneliness problem. Hi Suzanne, thanks for joining. But as I said before, it's not just about being alone that can bring on loneliness, but you could be in a group of people and still feel lonely. So in this period of social isolation, you could feel lonely even if you are in a house full of people. But the absence of social connection triggers those primal alarm bells. It's almost the same as you're going hungry, you're going thirsty, or you're in pain. So feeling lonely and having that loneliness is, as we said, triggering off that survival instinct. So no wonder that, you know, we're getting this loneliness that's going on and people are feeling more anxious and more depressed. So, you know, we need to be looking at ways that we can connect. And I think that last week when I spoke about kindness and how we reach out to other people and do acts of kindness, that goes a long way to being able to help people not feel so lonely. And so combining the kindness and reaching out to others goes a long way. Hi Amanda, nice to see you. So there are 3 types of loneliness. There's what we call social loneliness, and that's the lack of a wider circle of friends and family and colleagues. So we can really understand that at the moment social loneliness is probably going to be much higher because we're not at work interacting with colleagues. A lot of us, we're distanced from our friends and family, and we just don't have that same connectedness that we did before. There's also emotional loneliness, and that's the absence of a significant other, someone that we have a close attachment with and a meaningful relationship with. And at the moment, some people can be separated from their meaningful others and their partners, and we're separated perhaps from friends and family, so that can make us feel very lonely. And some people are in relationships that actually they don't have that connection with the people that they're in relationships with, and yet they're within that isolation with them, and that can bring on loneliness as well. And the third type is existential loneliness, and that's kind of the universal aspect of the human species that, you know, we're only going to live for so long, and there's this separatedness. Can't say that word. We feel separated from people. So, you know, when people die and we have that grief and we feel separate from people, that's a very real thing. And so, you know, we can understand that that's happening at the moment as well. So really concentrated kind of loneliness is going on within this pandemic. So what can we do about it? Well, there's no one fix it for loneliness. We all deal with things in different ways, and people deal with things differently, and that's the same for everything. But there are some things that we can do that maybe reduce down the loneliness that we feel. And the first one is obviously to reach out to others, because as I said, we're wanting that safety of being in a group of people, because being in a group of people makes us feel much safer, and having that connectedness with other human beings is really important. So reaching out to others, and you know, it doesn't matter how you reach out to people, but just being able to get that connectedness with them. So it could be a phone call, it could be a text message, it could be a social distance walk. But generally, because we are social animals, we need that connection. So any kind of connection is good for us. And even if you don't feel like it, then, you know, you need to almost make yourself reach out to others, because it will, we've got this threat system and this soothing system that we have internally. And if we're feeling a threat, and I say that aloneness kind of brings up that threat, we need to be kind to our soothing system. So reaching out to others will help to soothe us. So, and there's lots of helplines and things that you can phone. For the elderly, there's Age UK and Silverline. Mind have a helpline and things, and a befriending service. So there's lots of ways that you can reach out to others. You don't have to just rely on your friends and family. And of course, pets can be really useful as well. If you live on your own and you have a pet, that's giving you that connectedness. And dogs are really good as well, because actually they will get you out of the house, and you have to go out for walks and you have to talk to people. So you're getting that additional as well. But of course, when you're on your own and you're feeling lonely, it can start to feed your negative thoughts. And if you've watched any of my videos before, you'll know that I talk a lot about our negative thoughts and how we need to move our negative thoughts. Our negative thoughts are extremely powerful things, and we need to have a much nicer, kinder voice to ourselves. And Julie's saying her rabbit won't leave her alone. Well, maybe your rabbit's feeling a little bit lonely as well and wants some cuddles and some love as well. But yeah, pets are great because they ask for that attention, and we usually need to give that attention to them, and that makes us feel good when we reach out and have that connectedness with animal or human. So good rabbit. So yeah, I'm saying, when we're alone, we can start to beat ourselves up about things and actually convince ourselves that it's our fault that we're alone, that, no one wants us, no one wants to be with me, it's my fault. And, through this isolation, you might feel that, family and friends aren't reaching out enough to you. They're not being there for you as much as you'd like. And actually, we need to stop this negative cycle of, it's my fault and I'm not worth it. And actually try and reach out ourselves to others as well. The more alone you feel, the more these negative thoughts will start to happen for you. Because actually, if you're feeling lonely, you probably have a lot of time for your thoughts to be really quite cruel to you, and that we can be our own worst enemy, and we start to believe that critical voice. And positive events actually become harder to believe because we're feeding that isolation, and we're almost pushing away when people do reach out to us, because we're kind of saying, oh well, they don't really want to be in touch with me, they're not really reaching out because they've got their own lives and things, and we can almost push people away. And, loneliness isn't about the amount of time that we spend alone, but actually how we feel about that time that we spend alone. So if we can start to give ourselves more positive thoughts about that time that we're alone, then that loneliness isn't so strong for us. Actually, long-term loneliness actually structurally and biologically changes our brain. And it changes our brain in a way that we will reject connection, because we almost feel that we don't need that connection anymore, when actually our survival instinct really does, and we're fighting against that. So our neural responses to positive events actually become suppressed the more lonely we feel and the more often that we feel we're alone. And then, of course, that starts us into that spiral of anxiety and depression. And then it gets more difficult to convince that negative voice that actually there is someone out there for you, and you can connect with someone, and there are people out there for you. So every day, however small it might be, look for the positive in life, because the more positive you can bring to yourself, then actually that loneliness will become less, because you start to then respond in a positive way to other people when they do reach out to you. So we talked a few weeks ago about positive psychology, and actually how looking for the positives in life really makes a difference to how we react to things. And alone and loneliness is exactly the same. And finally, learn to be alone. The one person that we will always have in our life is us. So you will always be your constant companion. You will always be there for you. And actually, if you're unkind to yourself, you're critical to yourself, and you don't want to be in your company, then that makes being alone an even more difficult place to be. And if you're alone and you don't like yourself, or you're in a group of people but you don't feel connected with them because you don't feel that you're worthy of being in their company, then actually you're never going to feel like you can bring what you need to others, because you can't bring it to yourself. And Julie's saying, couldn't agree more. I always say, wake up and say what I'm grateful for. Yeah, absolutely. Every day, look around and see what you're grateful for to keep those positive vibes going. Hello, Sue. Thanks for joining us. So, make yourself the companion that you always want to be with. Because if you are able to be kind to yourself and be the companion that you always want to be with, when you are alone, you won't feel alone. So it's a great opportunity at the moment, whilst we're in this isolation period, that actually you can learn about yourself and discover more about yourself. You can understand what it means for you to be lonely, and what kind of things that you like to stop you being lonely. So if you're living on your own, kind of try new things, find out things about yourself that perhaps you didn't even know that you enjoyed previously. Maybe learn a new skill, learn a new language, do some online courses, and actually find things that you enjoy doing by yourself and they bring happiness to you when you're on your own. And actually discover that you don't need other people around you to make you happy. And, if you're in a house where you're feeling, even though you're surrounded by people, you're feeling very lonely, actually, if you're happy with your own company, it means you can take yourself away from those people for a little time, have your own time, and feel content and happy in your own company. And that will make you feel much less lonely when you're with other people. So, don't focus on your lack of connection, which may seem counterintuitive to say focus on yourself when you're alone. But actually, if you're relying on other people, it can make you feel more alone. So connection is really important, and you should still be reaching out to people, and you should still be having those connections with others if you can, and having whether they be short talks or texts or whatever, still have that connection, but actually focus very much on what it means for you to be on your own, and kind of decrease that feeling of loneliness when you're in your own company. Because if you enjoy your own company, you are never going to feel alone. And when you're having connections with people in your family, think about the quality of the connections that you have, because the quality of the connections is really important as well as the quantity. Quantity is good, and reaching out to various people is good, but it's also the quality of the connections that you have with those closest to you will prevent you from feeling so alone, because you really feel that you're connecting in a real way, and you feel that they're meeting your needs and you're meeting their needs. So strengthen the connection that you have with others around you. So those are the three things really to look at to combat your loneliness. Making sure you have connections with others, and how small or great those connections are, just keep reaching out to people. And if you know someone who you know is lonely, keep reaching out to them, even if they reject you. It might be that they're not in the right space to respond to you at the time, but they actually know that someone is there for them, and that is helping them. Try and stop those negative thoughts that happen when we're alone for a long time, that perhaps people don't want to be with us, that we're not interesting people, that no one wants to bother with us, because actually people always do, and there will always be someone who wants to connect with you and be with you. And so, look for the positives, feel positive about yourself, and you'll start to welcome in other people instead of rejecting them. And finally, that learn to be alone and be happy with yourself. And as I say, you will always have you as your constant companion through life. So make yourself a companion that you really want to have, and that when you're on your own and alone, you don't feel lonely. So I hope that's been helpful, ways to think about how you can combat loneliness. And as I say, in this period of isolation that we're going through, it's understandable that people are feeling much more lonely than they were previously. And hopefully, as we start to lift some of these isolation restrictions, people can start to connect a bit more and that loneliness will start to go. But I know that there are people who always struggle with loneliness, and you know, it's kind of trying to find ways that you can be content with yourself so that you don't feel that loneliness quite so strongly. So as always, I'm going to put the replay up onto my page, SeeClear Counselling, and that will go up very shortly. I will write a blog about this and I will put that onto my website, www.seeclearcounselling.co.uk. And if your anxiety has got a lot worse for you through this COVID-19, or you just want some support around perhaps some of the anxious feelings that you're having, then please do pop along and ask to join my Facebook support group, Beating Anxiety Through COVID-19 and Beyond, and I very happily welcome you in. Claire, really helpful. Glad to hear that it was helpful for you, Claire. Paula, good. I'm glad you found it helpful. So yeah, I'm hoping that you can always just pick out one little thing that resonated with you and maybe move forward with that. So thank you everyone for joining me. It's always lovely to see so many people join me, and you know, I'm quite happy if you want to ask questions and things. I'm always happy for that. But thank you for joining me and for your interaction, and I will see you all again next Tuesday at 4:30, and I will rack my brains and think about what I'm going to talk about next week. If anyone has any ideas about things that they'd like me to talk about or subjects that they'd like me to focus on, then please do put them in the comments below this video, and I'll happily kind of see if I can do something that will resonate with people as they're listening. So yeah, that's me. Thanks very much, and I'll see you all next week. Bye for now.